Well, I thought it was real. I mean, I thought it was going to be fun. I didn't know where the movie was going. I actually, first of all, like, I don't know if this movie was in 3D. Like, I don't know if that was an option. I don't know if
It
they
was.
did. Oh, it was. Oh, then I missed out because this movie was beautiful. Like it looked. Well, because for those who don't know, the guy who directed this movie also directed How to Train Your Dragon and Lilo and Stitch. So he's really good with like storytelling and animation. And I feel like with the forest, it reminded me a lot of. Hold on, let me get my props. Reminded me a lot of Bambi. I only bought that for the prop, by the way. And
I assume you don't have a VHS player, so yes, I assume that only has prop value.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
Color me. Hey, good for you, man. I can't find those things anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, it reminded me a lot. Like it was like it looked kind of like you were It looked like you were like in a painting. Like it actually looked like with heavy brushstrokes, and it actually looked like you were in a painting with characters running around. Like it really.
I don't know the name of the painting style, but it felt like somebody like we were painting with sponges.
Like Monet or Bob Ross or something like that.
That's kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah, so I like that. So I wish I could have saw this in 3D because, I mean, it looked like it would have pushed everything out and the characters coming out. But anyway, seeing it in I saw it in 2D like a peasant, and I really enjoyed it. But it wasn't just like the animation that really kept me involved. Like I really liked the characters. Like I really liked their arcs. So like their camaraderie dynamic, like the man versus technology, the man versus nature, man versus man.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really like those and I feel like it's good that like it's at a level where it's like the story is like old. Like it reminded me of like movies of old, like children's movies of old, where it's like the story is the concept is simple, but the characters are complex, and the themes are easily digestible, and I really like that. I thought Roz was really nice. I thought I liked they were Bright Bill's, lack of a better word, wingmen. And no, I'm not even proud of that one. No, I just thought it was just a very nice movie, but it was because I saw this with my friend and his daughter, and I asked the child I was with, don't take that out of context. I saw the movie with. There we go. She said that it was actually a really good movie, but it was kind of sad. So, and I agree. It is very emotional. It has funny moments. It's beautiful. I thought it was a great movie.
So before I go over to you, Chris, I want to pipe in with this. I bought my son the book. I guess it was last weekend. When we went to go see Transformers, afterwards we ran over to the bookstore, and I bought him The Wild Robot, and I said, I want you to read this week, and then so when I see you next weekend to take you to The Wild Robot, you'll have the book read, and you can tell me the difference between the book and the movie. So we watched the movie, and before, as we're driving to the theater, I asked him, so what have you thought of the book so far? He's like, well, I'm almost done with it, and it's really short pages, it's short chapters. It's different than I expected. I'm not sure how close it's going to resemble the movie. I'm enjoying the book, but I don't love it, and I wish you would let me go back to reading World War Hulk. And I said, finish The Wild Robot, then you can read that.
Read better stuff, kid.
He is very, very caught up in comics right now. It took him until he was 10, but I got him there.
Your son has a gift, and you are rotting his brain away with World War Hulk.
He chose it. He read Planet Hulk first. He RP tested on it and everything, and now he wanted to read the next part of it. I'm gonna make him read the Infinity Gauntlet next. I also gave him the Trial of Galactus, so it's not like I'm just giving him Hulk shit to read. Anyway, the point is, we walked out of the movie, and I was like, "All right, Jonas, tell me about the book to film adaptation." He was like, it doesn't follow the book all that well. Like, there is elements of it, sure, and there's definitely a different ending. And also, this is one in a series of books, so like there's more stuff out there, and they didn't really end the movie. I mean, they could do a sequel, but he was like, they didn't really address stuff in the book to lend itself to further storytelling. And I said, okay. He was like, also, and then he goes, I preferred the movie overall, and I actually think movies are a better way of telling a story than books. I don't know how I feel about that statement.
You, who so prominently say on this show repeatedly, books are for burning, and who has not given him anything to read, stuff to just look at. This is your own bed, sir, that you have made.
That is a fair criticism. All right, Chris. So that was my son's sort of take on it. He loved the movie just as much as my daughter and I did. Didn't quite hit him. I mean, it hit him in the feels, but he's not. He's more like his grandfather and Robert than he is like me and his sister, where we very viscerally and physically emote when stuff hits us that way. So that was his take. I will talk about my take after you, Chris. What did you think?
I thought it was delightful. I walked in ready to cry, so I cried through about half.
Just walked in with tissue boxes.
Yeah, I was ready. Like, bring it on. I need this. And, so it was beautifully shot. I saw it in Dolby. Yes. So I didn't 3D just fucks with me, so I'm glad I could see it in Dolby. And it was beautiful. It was a gorgeous movie. Beautifully animated. The characters were likable. I thought the fox was a lot like the fox from Zootopia. Like, to me,
I was missing Jason Bateman.
Yeah, I was like, if someone told me there was Jason Bateman, I would believe them because I didn't see that.
Disney owns that fox.
But I did like how the characters. Roz was. I mean, all of it was just sort of. It got together and like all the things like learning language through observation for 3 days. I was able to look past like any sort of things that I'd have to get past because I'm not that person that gets hung up on shit that's ridiculous. So but I went in with a really open mind, and I saw this with 4 friends, and every time I looked over, my wife was just like just sobbing because I was dehydrated too after this movie. It's a good movie. It's a better to me. It's been out of the millions of sequels, having its original film be this good is something I love about it. Like, we get so many sequels. Inside Out 2 or 3, those 2, right? And 2, and all these other sequels I didn't see them.
Utopia 2 coming out next year.
Oh, god damn it. So I saw Inside Out 2. I didn't see actually any of the Minion movies. Sadly, I don't know if that's a problem.
You're missing out. Robert can do an entire podcast just telling you how great the Minions are.
So
great's a stretch. Enjoyable is more how I'd phrase that.
Robert thinks the Minions movie are the best thing that happened since The Godfather. I have 4 podcasts that will back me up on that.
So
at no point is that a thing I say, for the record.
So there was a bit of a message looking at the wasteland, like like the Golden Ridge underwater, because apparently the ice caps have melted. But this island, the island fucking is totally fine, untouched by the ravages that the climate change have put upon it. But mostly, I like this movie quite a bit, and I recommend it to everyone I see. There are a ton of movies I see, like I saw The Substance last weekend. I can't not recommend that to Leah's parents or my parents, but I can recommend this to everyone. It's a delightful film. Yeah, I cried a lot, and I felt good about it afterwards. And,
I came home and I was like, Jen, this was like the best movie I've seen this year. And she was like, so was Transformers 1. Your opinion means nothing. And I'm like, hold on. I have 10 pit movies to choose for my top 10. See, this is in like my top 5 at least.
I haven't seen Transformers 1 yet, but actually, after hearing your review of it, I listened to just like I don't want anything given away, so I skipped to hear you gush about the beginning about it. So I have yet to see it, but I will. But I really, really enjoyed this movie, and I really hope that we get more original things. I'm going to say it all the time, and we're not. But this one, The Wild Robot, I loved it. I really did. And it's going to be in my top 10. I mean, right now, fall and winter has started really fucking hard. just to kick this off the top 5, I loved this movie. It's beautiful, and you know, I mean, I don't want to talk about well acted, but it was animated beautifully, and I mostly liked everything about this movie. I did.
Can I tell you that I'm so unprepared for my guest spot on your end of the year show? I'm forcing Robert to do a Damn You Hollywood. It is the 10 worst streaming movies of this year, just so I have stuff to add to my worst 5. Because it can't just be Madam Web and Borderlands.
Yeah.
And even Borderlands, I'm like whatever about.
First of all, it absolutely could. It really could.
We're gonna do this together, buddy. All right. When I was a child, 100 years ago, there were animated movies that were for children. That was the intended audience, but there was an element about their production that was appealing for adults. Parallel to that is a conversation that was had when we reviewed the movie Megan, where I asked the question, how old were you when you discovered horror? When you were exposed to the horror genre? And Robert said, I don't know, when I saw my first cartoon, probably, or something along those lines.
There was something to that effect, because if you look at the old Disney stuff,
Never heard of it.
There's segments that are like, hey, here's a thrilling escape sequence with a lot of horrific imagery.
There's a lot of funny stuff, yeah. There's a lot of funny stuff in those Disney movies.
Yeah, or, here's Are You Afraid of the Dark on TV? Or
So, some of the stuff I was thinking about, 2 very prominent cartoons from my youth, one of which gave me night terrors, or at least a big part of the night terrors that I had. The other one had horrific imagery, but didn't quite sit with me as badly as the first one did. I am referring to The Last Unicorn from Rankin and Bass, of which I've done a commentary for because Jesse wanted to torture me one night. And I've also referenced a whole bunch throughout the years I've been doing podcasting. Another one that I reference less, but I've brought it up once or twice before, is The Secret of Nim. The Secret of Nim has a lot of really, I wouldn't call it graphic, but definitely a lot of like horror imagery.
There's a lot of intense imagery in that, and Don Bluth, bless him, has a theory on this. And it goes something like, you can do children are resilient. If you make a kids movie, you can show them a lot of stuff. You can deal with heavy issues. It can be scary at times. I mean, there's 3 different sequences actually in The Land Before Time, before it turned into a self-referential parody, that are genuinely a little bit scary and heartbreaking. But his theory is you can do that because kids are stronger than you think,
right?
As long as the ending is happy, as long as your story concludes appropriately and is happy, kids will take that journey with you and will be okay by the end of it.
So as I watched the opening sequences of The Wild Robot, I was very much reminded of Moving Day, the Moving Day sequences from The Secret of Nim. And I was taken back to that conversation about light horror you're exposed to when you're a child. That initial sequence of Roz being dropped on the island and the animals, it in a more serious way, but it definitely was like I had a lot of stuff pinging at once. That's why I'm taking time to talk about this. I've watched a lot of movies, especially since I've been podcasting the last 20 years. So when something pings my brain as much as this one does, I know like we're in for a good trip, and this is something I'm going to want to talk about in some degree of detail. Watching Roz get dropped on the island and then have the animals all over it, tearing out pieces of
the raccoons.
Yeah, and I kept thinking about the critters from South Park. So between my thoughts about Moving Day, Secret of Nim, The Last Unicorn, and then the critters from South Park, I was having quite a moment. I kept thinking, like, I know where this movie is going, and it's not going to be this bad. But what a way to open your animated feature for families with this objectively horrifying imagery. Essentially, a being got dropped on a planet, and it was beaten, molested, and torn apart by everything on the goddamn island that could get its mitts on it. It was rough, man. Like, even my kids and I were all looking at each other like, Jesus Christ, what is this movie we're watching? It was great. I loved it. The movie is gorgeous. I was on the edge of my seat, and not necessarily because it was a suspenseful movie. I would not say that. I was on the edge of my seat because I wanted to be closer to the animation. I now know how people felt watching Avatar. Like,
yes.
For the first time in, outside of maybe a fantasy realm that I would like to live in besides this wretched coil we call Earth, this was the first time I wanted to be in the screen. Everything looked so pretty to me. I was, it was like the cartoon smoke from a pie. Like, it was grabbing me, like, come into the theater, like, sit down, fat ass. No, I want to be in the screen.
I want to live in the sauce.
Yeah. So, it's the prettiest animated movie I've seen, I think, since Moana. Because Robert and I have reviewed a lot of animation on here, and I think Moana was the last time I made a huge deal about how pretty something looked that was animated.
Probably Disney's stuff since then has not been all that great to look at.
Yeah,
we were complimentary of Elemental.
I would say Luca.
Luca's lush.
Moana is the last conversation I remember you and I having where I distinctly for a while talked about how crisp the animation looked, how photorealistic it looked.
Moana. The other thing about that, Moana is a very nature movie, and Elemental is a city, a very nice city, but it is.
I was thinking about Luca too. We talked about how pretty Luca was.
Yeah.
But
Luca has a very distinct, Italian aesthetic.
Yeah.
To it, and that's what it's trying to do. This is nothing but nature.
Right. And almost. I think that's as much as I am definitely a city mouse, I can be taken in by the wonder and beauty of nature, and this movie was very successful in creating that pull for me. I could not have loved the story of this adoptive parent taking on this child, and what the writer was using this movie as a metaphor to talk about motherhood, especially, but parenting in general. It was spot on. There was a lot of discussion in this movie in both the text and the subtext about what it means to be a parent. Imparting your wisdom, your knowledge, your behavioral guidance, and then the hard work of having to take a step back and literally letting that child fly. It's rough. I have a 10 and a 13-year-old. It's not easy sometimes to take a step back as a parent when you love your children, to let them go and do things and experience the world on their own, so they'll take those lessons in and learn the way that they're supposed to, so that they can then become successful, productive people. So there was a lot going on for me in this movie. The relationship between what's the Gosling's character's name?
Bright Bill.
The relationship between Roz and Bright Bill was wonderful. Very, very eloquently written. Not to be outdone is Roz's relationship with the fox's name. Fink, yes. Sorry. I'm really bad with character names. But, and I kept thinking, I don't know if Robert's going to like or hit me for this, but I kept thinking about Robert with the Fink character. Just in the feeling like an outsider, feeling like you don't quite belong, and he kind of clings to her because here's this non-judgmental being that's entered this character's world, and they form a friendship, they form a bond, and then when that character is ready to move on and thinks like what am I supposed to do without you? There's a lot of parallels I could feel with that. But I very much enjoyed the Roz and Fink relationship. the camaraderie, the interdependence, the love that they shared between the two of them. There's a reason why the movie got me in the feels, because all that stuff really got to me, in a happy way. Anything else about the movie? The action sequences where like the birds. It was a nice hero moment for Bright Bill when he leads the geese out of the farm, as it were.
They leave the biodome.
Biodome, yeah.
Sure, I don't know what it actually is.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because
they see Pauly Shore and just know they have to get out of there.
Well, it was an interesting thing because like so much of the movie is, something I was talking to my kids about. I love another element of the movie, another theme of the movie is, and I hate to sound cliche about this and just name a book, but the book is the thing I'm talking about. Having a purpose-driven life, knowing that you have a thing to do, a task, a purpose is a part of what gives our life meaning. The movie addresses that directly in the character of Roz and her literal list of task completion list. And so it's so funny because like I'm watching Roz and the robot. Somebody in their comments, fan Niminator said that the movie reminded him of the Iron Giant meets Bambi meets Wall-E. And
not an unfair crossover.
Yeah.
You put those in the blender together. This is that you get about this.
So I was thinking about how robots, unless it's like Data from Star Trek, they're not necessarily supposed to emote. You don't necessarily read emotion on them, but there's a very clear presentation of purposeless depression going on with Roz in the first act of the movie, and the robot says, "Doesn't anyone have something along the lines of doesn't anyone have a task for me?"
Yeah.
And without one, the character is lost. And I don't want to get too far off on a tangent with this, but I definitely saw a religious reading of this movie in the sense of, and it doesn't have to be any particular religion, but just that sense of like what drives us, what gives us purpose, then having things to do, and without it, we're lost. So moving forward, when Roz takes on raising this gosling in absence of its parent, and then it's like, well, you got to teach it to fly, you got to feed it, you got to teach it to swim, then you got to teach it to fly. And she gets the thing in the air, and he flies, and he migrates, and I'm like, all right, we're done here. Like little did I know there was still more movie to go.
Yeah,
I kind of had like, now I know how everyone else who saw Return of the King felt, because I'm like, are we done now? And like, no, there's still more fucking movie to go. And not that I was mad about it. I thought I wasn't having a good time, but I definitely felt like there was some natural conclusions to the movie and then they just kept going.
Chapter 1.
This would not be a Damn You Hollywood if I didn't have a quibble. And that this robot fights so hard for its freedom and autonomy to turn around and say, I'm going back anyway. Because if I don't, I understand why. It made sense, but it made sense the first time. It keeps doing different pronouns. I'm just gonna go with she. The first time Roz gives herself up, nothing changed from that point to the next point after they've burnt the island down and destroyed the robots and did all kinds of stuff. She arrived at the same exact place. It's a small quibble. It's not worth screaming about, but it's definitely one of those things where I was like, okay, that's the one issue I have with this movie is she arrived at a place, fought to change it, arrived the exact same spot again. And then, they do the reuniting at the very end of it. And it's, that was the other part of it where it's like, I don't want to be mad at this because it's magic, but the idea of they wipe this computer's memory and then through the power of magic and motherhood, it remembers who it is and who the baby is. All right. Like, I don't want to be mad at it because it's like being mad at Disney magic or Santa magic. It's magic. It's there for a reason. But in a movie, a movie with talking animals and all of this other stuff. I'm trying to figure out where the line of reality is, and maybe kind of like Chris, maybe not get so caught up in that and just kind of enjoy it for what it was. So those are my thoughts. Robert, what did you think?
I'm going to echo the vast majority of the positives that have been shared already. It is gorgeously animated. The style in particular, again, very painterly. The difference in artistic style between the robot and the natural world, I think, was a very obvious but a very good choice, because they're not they're not like way out of sync, but they are not the same style of art between those two things. Right. Yeah, the emotions all hit. If I have a quibble, it's not actually with, not necessarily with the finale. It's more with their. Put it this way, I thought this was a stronger and more interesting story when the animals behaved like animals, even though they talked.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's what happened. The second trailer came out. I felt the same way. Like, oh, these animals are talking now. Yeah.
Well, I was okay with it for a little, mostly because they talk, but like they're still animals, and it's a weird thing that for the first, 2/3, give or take, of this movie, they're not overly anthropomorphized. The opossum is like, I've got 6 kids. Here's a shriek. Okay, I got 5 kids. Like that's not a human response. That's an animal response.
Right.
Or the fox is like boiling a crab.
Yeah, I'll give you a good one. As sort of a distinction, and I laughed hard at it because it's a funny line, but it's one of those that's a little too human for you. After they've defeated the robots, and the one rabbit goes, "And we will divide the robot meat amongst all of us."
Yeah.
I was like, all right, it's a funny joke, and it was delivered up with a plum, but that's too human for that animal character.
Yeah, or there's a line when the bear looks at the fox and goes, I'm going to be chasing you again tomorrow, right? And then he laughs like, no, I'm just kidding with you. We're buddies now. Like, no, that was actually stronger with the original, with the original thing. Like, I don't hate you. We're not enemies, but I'm a bear and you're a fox, and tomorrow I still got to eat,
Right.
And so I thought in general it was stronger when it was dealing with stuff like that instead of.
When you brought up Switzerland, it was like Switzerland existed because if they didn't, they'd all freeze to death and die, and many of them were on the verge of death when Roz found them. That's the strength of that scene, but it only works if everyone acknowledges this. It was this or death. Tomorrow we go back to normal.
And that's which is why I was okay with them kind of like re-rallying to help Roz. But in general, like it became a little bit too Disney for me, and I mean that in slightly the negative sense this time around. With all of with a lot of the anthropomorphic Disney talking animal stuff, you get just too far removed from reality in a lot of them, where nothing behaves like it's supposed to behave. And for this movie to have spent a lot of the time with the animals fundamentally behaving like animals, even if they talk, they don't react to things like people, they react to things like animals do. To then go to a very Disney-fied existence by the end of it, that doesn't quite work for me. That felt a little bit off.